Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. Let's say your competitor is 100 times your size and they dominate the category. Do you quietly chip away by finding your niche and staying under the radar, or do you take a big shot? Well, this is a David versus Goliath story. So of course, we'll be talking about slinging a rock of sorts. Now, Goliath in this case is Salesforce with over 10 billion in sales. And I just checked a current market cap of about 130 billion. Now, David, well, that's the company called Freshworks, which tops 100 million in revenue in 2018. And that's not exactly tiny, but it is 100 times smaller than our Goliath Salesforce. Now, the field of battle, you might ask? Well, perhaps you've heard of Dreamforce, which is, you've probably been there. It's a San Francisco-based conference that attracts over 170,000 attendees, which some say would be a $5 billion brand all on its own. Anyway, so you're at Dreamforce, you've attended this event, you happen to be in San Francisco, you look up into the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a blimp. And it's not the usual Goodyear or MetLife banner. No, this one slings out hashtag sales fail.
Salesforce.
Oh, wait, I screwed it up. Hashtag failforce, right? Which is, okay, failforce, not Salesforce. Huh. Now, it's not exactly a giant killer, but it did generate a killer amount of PR. And would you believe there's actually a David behind this campaign? Yes, today's guest is David Thompson, CMO of Freshworks. David, welcome to the show.
Drew, it's great to be here. Thanks for that intro.
Well, and thank you for the correction, because obviously, as I was drafting this little intro this morning, I went, oh, I hope I have that hashtag right. Anyway, all right. So, but before we get to this, because this is a really good example of guerrilla marketing, and I love talking about this, but you have a long history of what we call on this show renegade thinking, whether it's an over-the-top Super Bowl ad featuring RuPaul for WebEx, or establishing a new category for Domo, which I think took a shot at Tableau in the process. Anyway, have you ever been afraid that one of these efforts would blow up in your face?
Oh, totally. And if I weren't afraid, then there would be something wrong with the idea.
I love that. Now, and it's true. I mean, there's no way, if you're really going bold, and we tell this to our clients all the time, if you're not a little bit afraid, then we didn't bring a big enough idea. But
so you know how I acid test that, Drew? The way I acid test that is if the CEO doesn't first react like, wow, but oh, my board.
Wow,
and take it and like
board.
Wow, oh, my board. If they don't take it to the board, it's not good enough.
Right. Right. If they don't, because they're so worried. Now, what's funny is one of my favorite stories, I think it was the CEO of Aflac before the night before they launched the Aflac, the duck campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He decided not to tell the board and just figured, you know what? We're going to run this thing and I'll either be fired or a hero probably by tomorrow. And what's amazing about
that's gutsy.
Yeah. And what's amazing about that story is that at the time, people don't remember this, but Aflac and Colonial Life were exactly the same size. 10 years later, Aflac was double.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty, had 40% share, versus 20. I mean, they had double Colonial Life. So sometimes taking a big risk definitely pays out. But I'm curious, as someone, and again, your PR folks shared like 5 different examples. This feels like taking big chances are part of your personal brand. I mean, this is just sort of a mentality you bring to the role.
Yeah, it really is. It's just, I think there's nothing I'm more terrified of, Drew, than being bored. And there's nothing more boring in most cases than B2B marketing. And so I just can't stand most of it. And, you know, I have this kind of theatrical consumer approach to things. I was a theater major in college, for heaven's sake. And so I just look at everything through that eye of, you know, what story are you telling? What's the conflict, and how fun is it? And how much does it stand out? And if it doesn't stand out, it's just not worth doing.
Right. Okay. Well, you mentioned theater in college. I mean, you were at Yale. There must have been some famous actors that came up with you.
Oh gosh, you know, I was a bartender at the Yale Repertory Theater and got to hang out with James Earl Jones and Meryl Streep and Diane Wiest.
Yes, there you go. I was thinking Meryl Streep spent a lot of time.
Oh yeah. She likes a good whiskey before she goes on stage.
Well, there you go. So there's the secret to all of this is a good whiskey or a good gin. So, all right, maybe you could, so I mentioned that you had a bunch of past experiences. Maybe you could sort of elaborate on one you look back and you go, okay, that was a huge chance, but there was a huge payout, and I'm really proud of taking that risk.
Well, it's, you know, the thing I'm probably most famous for is the RuPaul campaign. Because at the time that was just incredibly edgy and incredibly kind of socially unacceptable in some ways, you know, generated a lot of hate mail, and also generated a 10x growth in our revenues in the year that we ran that campaign, and also took the company public at the same time that was happening. My favorite thing to say about our financials at WebEx is we went public on $2.5 million on trailing revenues, massive losses.
Wow.
But then in that 1 year that we went public, and with the RuPaul campaign behind us, which by the way was called Meetings Used to Be a Real Drag, we took our revenues from 2.5 to 25 million. And that 10x growth at the time was, even though it was the law of small numbers, was extremely exciting to the market, caused a lot of excitement in the market, and certainly excitement among our shareholders.
And what's interesting to me is, it's funny because looking back now, you know, WebEx was a challenger brand and acted like it. I don't see that now. It's funny that the brand.
WebEx is IBM now.
Yeah, and
WebEx has become the safe choice, and as opposed to Zoom.
Right, and speaking of Zoom, we're using that to record the show.
Absolutely.
I've had Janine Pelosi on the show.
And by the way, the Zoom guys are all WebEx people who left Cisco.
There you go. Yeah. Well, then it got bought at just another acquisition that didn't quite.
What can you do?
What can you do? It sort of loses its mojo. It's so interesting. So, okay. So you took a lot. That must have taken some big courage. But at the moment, here's the interesting part. It was $2.5 million. You really needed to take a risk to get noticed.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to just rewind to 1999. And, you know, it was the craziest of crazy time of the dot-com bubble and advertising. And you had the sock puppet, and you had other brands like shooting gerbils out of a cannon. And you had another brand, you know, with Cindy Crawford as their supermodel. And actually, that was the thing that kind of inspired us to say, hey, let's make fun of all this stuff. Let's hire RuPaul as our supermodel glamazon spokesperson, right? Like, let's kind of make fun of the whole thing. And the other thing we did, this is kind of the unsung heroism of the campaign, is we also changed the name of the company. So the company was called Active Touch, which I always teased the CEO sounded kind of like virtual porn or something like that. I'm like, dude, like, I hate that name. We have to change that name. It's horrible. And he's like, well, what are you going to call it? And I literally woke up one morning, got in the shower, and I said, it's like FedEx on the web. It's WebEx. And so we changed the name of the company, like just literally on the spur of the moment, so that we could position around web, because web then was like, you know, the coin of, you know, recent vintage, right? You know, anything that had the name coin in it was hot. Anything that had web in the name then was hot. So we changed it to WebEx. We bought the domain for $15,000. And then we hired RuPaul to take it to the moon.
So when you think about that, one, it was a smaller company. And so finding a CEO to approve that a little easier than some of the other later ones. What do you find that you have to make a connection with your CEO? I mean, they got to understand what they're getting when they get you.
It's all about the relationship. And it's all about whether the CEO has the guts and the daring do to go out and really make a splash and really tell a story that pops through the noise, which is obviously an extremely hard thing to do in our media environment today. And so, renegade marketing is only as good as the renegade mentality of the CEO. For sure. And I've been very lucky to work with people who get it, like Subra Iyer, who's the CEO of WebEx. The reason he and I connected so much is he grew up in Bollywood. I mean, He literally grew up in Mumbai in an apartment building with actors and directors and producers like running around all of the time, making all kinds of noise and color and song and dance, like literally on the stairs of his building. And so he got it. He got the fact that making an emotional connection, creating drama, creating conflict, and then resolving that conflict in the story is key to breaking through.
Now, one of the things that I can hear some of the B2B folks thinking about in this moment is, all right, you're just talking about getting attention. And that's not, those are moment in time things. I mean, how do you, as you think about these attention getting things, make sure that there's more to it than that just, sort of the gorilla in the jockstrap, which is the legendary means of getting attention, right? All you have to do is put a gorilla in a jockstrap and you can get attention. Easily done. Works every time. But unless you're selling jockstraps or gorilla suits, it's probably not going to be very effective. So how do you sort of, as you think about these sort of big stunty-like things in the context of B2B, sort of rationalize them strategically or make sure they hold together? So
Drew, it's all about the payoff. Right? And it's all about the product. So the reason we were so sure of ourselves, like doing the RuPaul campaign, or even doing the Salesforce campaign, flying it up against the Salesforce Tower and Dreamforce, was we had great payoff, right? So in the case of WebEx, even in the RuPaul ad, if you watch the RuPaul ad, she's actually talking about benefits of how much more productive you can be using WebEx. I mean, it's all wrapped up in very high comedy and high camp, but the message is there. And then once you got to the website, it all paid off in terms of a free trial, right? And then in the case of Salesforce, what we did is we worked with Forrester to really find out the deeper meaning of, like, we're not just like doing random acts of marketing guerrilla action against Salesforce. We're making a real point. And the real point with Salesforce, and by the way, the link is still live at salesforce.com. There's actually an S in there. It's kind of hard to say. Salesforce.com. We work with Forrester to survey Salesforce users. And as it turns out, Salesforce users are miserable. and not only that, but their managers are on the verge of getting rid of it in the smaller and medium-sized businesses. They literally said, we're going to get rid of this thing. 69% said we're going to get rid of this thing within 2 years. And so we were using the campaign to point people at that data. And when you summarize the data in the survey, we actually derived the ground action campaign, which was expensive, frustrating, and complicated. Who says you can't have all three?
All right. Well, look, I have got a lot more questions about this, but I want to back it up a little bit. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll dive into sort of what you do your first 100 days. So stay with us. Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back, and my guest is David Thompson from Freshworks, and we've been talking about this sort of really, I will call it outrageous, stunt-driven, but there's more to it than that, campaign that is properly called Failsforce, as in rhymes with Salesforce. Okay, I want you to go back to day one when you arrive at this company, and what did you do those first 100 days? Do you have a 100-day plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my, with any, and by the way, I do a lot of consulting. I've done a lot of consulting with companies, so I've got this kind of down to a science. But the first 100 days is all about strategy and positioning and getting to the core truth of the story, right? Like what is it that's really driving a company? You know, whether it's Domo, whether it's WebEx, whether it's Freshworks. And so let's just take the Freshworks example. You know, at the core of Freshworks is this incredible ambition that the founder has, but beyond that, to the ambitions of India to emerge beyond being perceived as a back office nation, as a BPO nation, and truly as an innovation nation. And Freshworks is an incredibly innovative company that's really running circles around a lot of its competitors in terms of SaaS software and the way it approaches engineering problems, but it's quite humble. And this is something that I'm always pointing out to my Indian colleagues, like, why aren't you talking about that? Why aren't you sharing that? Why aren't you publicizing that? Because they just have this engineering mentality of just digging in and doing great work and then assuming people will notice. And that's my job to say, you know, people will not notice. You have to simplify the story. You have to translate the story. You have to put the story together in a way that people will understand. And so in the case of this kind of core philosophy of Freshworks and India, we actually wrote a book called Indian Democratic Design, which it brings together the essence of what it means to be innovative in India. You can actually see the book online. It's demdesign.in, demdesign.in. And it tells the story of how the democratic history and culture of India is driving a whole new wave of innovation in terms of making products easier to use, more accessible, simpler, and yet scalable at a cost that's, you know, extremely attractive.
Now, a lot there, a lot to, as some of my colleagues will say, to unpack.
Unpack, yeah.
Unpack, you know, and I hate that expression, but I wish I could come up with something to dive into. How's that? We need to dive into some of those things. First of all, I want to stop on the engineering culture thing, because I've noticed this a couple of times. Whenever the two founders are engineers, oftentimes the company will enjoy really good growth for a long time just on the strength of the product. But at some point, marketing needs to come in and brand needs to come in. And one of the things that struck me about Freshworks is it's this sort of amalgam of branded house and house of brands. I mean, you've got Freshworks as a parent brand. You've also got Freshworks as a product, and then you've got all these other fresh brands.
Yes.
And I'm imagining that sort of, it's got to create some complications, because you're not, I mean, talk about that architecture.
So Drew, that's very astute. So what we are in the process of doing, this is actually the evolution of the brand at Freshworks. So the company was originally called Freshdesk, which was the name of its, and is the name of its flagship product, Freshdesk, which is a support, customer engagement center product. And so once the company went multi-product and started building a platform, it changed the name to Freshworks because it would have these multiple names. And so it was at that moment that, you know, G's the founder and the CEO of Freshworks, realized we really need to shift the mentality from being a house of brands to a branded house. And I will say that that's still very much a work in progress, right? And the reason for that is really interesting, actually, because the way Freshworks has been run up to now, up to the first 150 million in ARR, has been kind of like an incubator. So each one of these products has its own kind of product pod, which goes to work in complete, almost like, the Macintosh project at Apple that was just, off to the side. And it's a skunkworks garage project. And so each one of these products at Freshworks has been born that way. And then it grows up on its own. It proves product to market fit, whether it's fresh sales in the CRM space or fresh service in the IT space or fresh chat in the customer engagement space with Freshdesk. And each one has its own market that it's going after. And so what happened from a strategy point of view is we realized that house of brand strategy and that kind of product pod mentality was limiting our cross-sell. And so the brand strategy is now to unify everything behind Freshworks to articulate the value of the Freshworks platform, which is enormous and something that we haven't really talked about that much. Like this Windows level platform that we've developed for custom apps. And so we're now taking that to market under the umbrella of Freshworks and the customer for life mission that we've given ourselves.
And it's interesting. So I'm going to just explore that just a little bit. And there's a couple of things going on in my mind as I hear you. So you've got folks that have gotten to know one of those sub brands, right? Freshdesk being the primary driver of revenue, probably, and then you've got these other brands. And so if you were a product manager on Freshdesk or Fresh Sales, for example, you would say, hey, look, I got different targets. I got to get in. I got to market those brands as brands. And then if you were parent company person like yourself, the CMO, you're thinking, all right, I can't afford to splinter my money and my budget and so forth. So I have to have this umbrella brand. But even as you describe Freshworks, to me, it's Freshworks now is parent brand and corporate brand. It's product brand and a parent brand. So you've really got some challenges. But
absolutely. Totally.
And I'm just, one of the things that we really try to help our clients do is to simplify their offering because it makes it within, even whether it's a software product with lots of features sometimes brands have a tendency to name their features and it's like, oh my God. And they have 17 different features within the product. And so the customer just goes, wait, I just want this. Make it easy. So we push a lot branded house. In fact, that's all we do. We don't do house of brands because it's too complicated for us. We can't wrap our formula around it. How are you sort of dealing with this sort of, potential dilution of your brand and then this sort of larger brand?
So the way we're dealing with that at a strategy level, Drew, is to redefine the category. Okay. And so what we've landed on there is, look, we have, if you look at it through a traditional positioning and categorization lens, we have a CRM product, we have an IT product, and we have a chat product, and we have products that comfortably fit into existing categories. But what we're doing is we're using the unified brand to promote a single category that we're calling customer engagement. And so the good news is, like from a Gartner point of view, customer engagement exists, right? It's basically defined as the support space. If you look at their MQs, but we and others, actually, it's not just Freshworks. We're trying to grab onto that idea of customer engagement and expand the meaning of it. Okay. And actually, if you take it back to the campaign with Salesforce, what we're ultimately trying to do with that campaign is we're not only trying to say that SaaS as you know it today and the cloud as you know it today in the enterprise is failing the user. We're also trying to say that the category is failing. Like CRM as a category, as this top-down, C-suite driven initiative inside of a company is failing. Because when you design software as they say in India, when you design software for the king, not for the commoner, guess what? The commoner winds up pretty unhappy and overthrows the king, right? And that's the fresh phenomenon of Freshworks, where we're designing the software for the user, and they don't care about the reports that go to the board. They care about getting their work done more efficiently and engaging with customers more meaningfully. So it's that meaning of what is customer engagement that ultimately drives every business and moves across all of our products, and in the process of doing that, redefines the category.
And it's interesting. So category redefinition is a tricky area too. You don't want to be in your own category because if you're in your own category and you don't have if there's no competitors, it's not a category, is it?
Yeah. So that's
right?
That's why I think we're doing some very interesting kind of kabuki moves on the categorization, because customer engagement exists, but it exists as strictly defined by Gartner.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're saying is Gartner's vision is too limited, right? Okay. We need to broaden that meaning. And by the way, to be very respectful, and by the way, I have absolutely enormous respect for Mark Benioff. Mark Benioff is one of my marketing heroes, not to mention business heroes, but he did the same thing when he launched Salesforce.
Sure.
CRM actually had nothing to do with SFA when he launched it, right? He actually grabbed onto CRM and said, you know what, it's everything we want it to mean, right? And so what we're saying is, Mark, that was great, but that was 20 years ago, and now you've become the new Oracle of the cloud, right? Yep. And guess what? No one wants Oracle in the cloud. They want something fresh, right?
So I can't wait for the next time I have Salesforce on the phone, or someone from Oracle on the show, because we'll just have so much fodder for them.
Yeah, of course.
But as we think through this part of the thing, so you get there, you see this giant sort of colossus. What was the moment when you decided, all right, we can make this Salesforce thing actually work?
When the CRM product, the SFA product, to go back to the old meaning of the word, when we realized that our SFA product was really beginning to take down deals against Salesforce, it was ready to go, right? And more importantly, again, like, we have a platform, we have this common code, these common APIs and common SDK that unites the products in a very meaningful way, but we just weren't talking about it, right? And there was no real sales reason to have the unified brand. But once we realized, okay, well, we've got more synergy between the sales product and the support product, you know, it was time to go big with that message, and there was no better way to kind of put ourselves on the map than to go after Salesforce. Actually, the name of the campaign was Hit Refresh, and then Salesforce was the kind of the air and ground activation aspect of that campaign.
Okay, very cool. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back. And we've been talking about this sort of guerrilla campaign, but I know there's a lot more to it. And you just mentioned this notion of hit refresh and so forth. So you have this blimp, and I'm imagining you've alerted the media so that because a lot of this kind of thing it's about the press coverage that you got. But I think there's more to it. I imagine you must have had SEO, SEM, articles. Talk about the
fully integrated campaign.
Thing. Yeah. So lay out the elements for us.
So it was a fully integrated multimedia campaign, outdoor, a lot of outdoor around the Bay Area here, which is a very target-rich environment for us, especially among startups and medium-sized businesses, which is our sweet spot. And it was everything. We had outdoor, we had radio, we had digital. So, you know, it's that surround 'em mentality. And then we had the big PR lift with Salesforce. And I sent you some samples of the video ads that we did, which were really animated stories about this user frustration that we'd identified in the Forrester research, right? This 2/3 of users saying like, I really find it very frustrating and hard to use. And I don't understand why my boss makes me use this stuff, right? So we wanted to bring that concept to life because it's actually getting to the point where managers are so frustrated with their users being frustrated that everyone's frustrated.
Right. Yeah, I want you to know I had, we're going to link to the videos that you sent, but I had nightmares about the close-up of the gentleman, the animated characters, whatever that is called.
The uvula.
Yes.
The uvula, the wobbling uvula.
Yes, it's just a little too close for comfort. Anyway,
it's very dramatic.
It is dramatic. And you had some fun with a little reference to the 1984 famous Apple commercial. So you're just, again, showing your challenger brand thing. So as you were looking at this program, what were the key sort of metric goals that you had in mind for it?
Oh, sure. Well, obviously, top of funnel was huge for us. We're building our brand. We're building our awareness. We're very expert in digital marketing. We're probably some of the best, one of the best Google advertisers in the world. And so the thing that we've identified is, we're obviously always trying to get our cost per lead down and finding the right balance between the investment in the awareness, because as click-through rates on branded terms, tend to be 3 to 4 times higher and more qualified than they are on generic terms. And so we're trying to shift that balance between branded term clicks and generic clicks. So we're looking very closely at that. We're looking very closely at traffic. And of course, at the end of the day, we're looking at deals, right? And for us, one of the key metrics was getting our participation rate up, because when you have low brand name recognition and you're looking at higher dollar value deals, it's obviously harder to get in those deals. So for us, getting into more MQs, we added 2 MQs to our roster this year, as well as watching these leads that come into the website turn into actual participation in RFPs. Was a key metric for us.
Now, I imagine there was a huge spike after the blimp goes up and you get some PR. Were you able to sort of take advantage of that and sustain it in any way?
Oh, absolutely. So the sustaining is the baseline. So you measure whether your traffic has achieved a new baseline after the campaign, right? Now, obviously, as any good marketer will tell you, you need to keep reinvesting in the brand to not only keep that baseline where you want it to be, but also to grow it more. And that's what we've been doing both in North America and internationally as well.
It feels like you would really benefit if there were more Dreamforces.
Well, that is true, but the good news is, regular old branding works. It just works. It's always amazing to me how, running a 6 to 12 month outdoor campaign with a bunch of radio and a bunch of digital to support it, it's just amazing how you just start seeing everything light up. You see your website light up, you see the leads light up, and most importantly, in a B2B environment, you see the eyes of the salespeople light up, right? You're saying like, wow, this customer just told me they saw our ad on the train and they were so excited.
Right. I love the anecdotal stories. It's amazing how powerful those are. Do you have a sense, do you have an attribution model where you can sort of say, oh, well, radio accounts for this and outdoor accounts for that? That must be a little hard to distinguish.
Well, as you know, attribution models are notoriously difficult to fine tune. And especially when you're spending as much as we do on advertising across the board. being able to tease those sources of leads apart is always a challenge. But we've got a very sophisticated data model. We've got a very sophisticated team that really knows how to help us run experiments, controlled experiments that are good at isolating the different elements of a campaign. Working very closely with the media buyer, if you flight things in a controlled way, you can have a better sense of how things are working on a per channel basis.
Very cool. I wanted to, before I sort of wrap this up, I did go to your blog and I saw, I think it was through search, but a wonderfully funny blog post about sort of 5 reasons why, it was Salesforce versus your product. And the reasons and the writing was hilarious. Like, well, if you're into 90s bands, then we totally understand why you want to stay for it. And I thought it was hilarious. It was so refreshing. I sort of searched around. I said, am I going to find more of that? And I said, well, I'll be just happy to find that. That was, again, that had that tongue-in-cheek humor that is so missing from B2B marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's just, the situation that we're in right now calls for a very healthy dose of humor, because, SaaS and cloud have now been around for 20 years and have got a bunch of barnacles and, kind of traditional thinking that's just kind of seeped into the business model and the marketing, and it's time to break all that stuff up. That's what I say.
So we'll be expecting more humor. Now, I did notice on your LinkedIn profile, I got to find these, where's this data? It was pretty impressive. I think it said that during your stay, you had grown revenue by 70%. It was at
Freshworks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're on a very aggressive growth path right now at the company.
And what do you think? Can you point to a number and say, I can attribute, 70% of pipeline to marketing?
Oh yeah. I mean, and you have to, obviously you have to look at marketing holistically. There's the branding investment, which is always a little fuzzier than the actual, click through from a Google ad, which led to a sign up, which led to a deal. Right. And so being able to relate those is one of the more sophisticated things that our data team is working on. And we're applying a lot of artificial intelligence and ML expertise to that. But we're getting a much clearer picture of that full effect of the funnel.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I think it achieved the highest enterprise growth in the company history, which was 60%. That was what it said. Oh,
yep.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
So not everything when you do these programs goes exactly as planned. There must have been something in this Salesforce program that you went, that didn't work quite, or that was unexpected or a surprise. What were there any surprises that you encountered along the way on that program?
Well, without divulging too many details, so this was an upside surprise, and I have to say, Drew, the Salesforce campaign and Hit Refresh campaign was an unmitigated success. It just worked exactly as we wanted it to, and one of our fears, of course, is look, we're doing all of this in good humor. As I said, Mark Benioff is one of my heroes, right? And I wouldn't call him a mentor since I obviously don't know him that well, but certainly his ideas have mentored me. And so we went into the Salesforce and Hit Refresh campaign with the mentality of this is something Mark would have done when he was younger, right? Yeah. And so he'll understand it. And so what I was most gratified on the upside was, there was all this fear, they're going to get pissed off, right? And they didn't get pissed off. Yeah. They loved it. Everybody loved it. Yeah. And, the conversations since then, have been very warm and funny in and of themselves. And so, it's a good outcome for everybody.
Yeah, I think the last thing they would, if we were working with them, the last thing you'd want to do is react at all, other than, I mean,
Absolutely.
right?
Welcome to the party.
Yeah,
Welcome to the
exactly.
party.
And you only get attacked if you're the leader. I mean,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
and do you think of it, and have you studied challenger brand? Do you think about that in those characteristics of the brand, or is this just you and how you approach things?
Well, I have to say that a lot of this is very personally driven. I mean, this is, as I said, as a theater person and as someone who's very easily bored, I don't ever stay in any situation that's boring. And if I'm not able to kind of create drama in a productive way that has a big payoff for the brand and the shareholder value, I'm usually like on to the next thing.
Right. And I love that. I used to say that you can never bore anybody into buying your product. It's just true. I mean, just think about it. I mean, if you fall asleep, and then I'm curious, I imagine this had quite an impact on employees as well.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, people just love it. Their parents ask them about it. Their friends ask them about it. It's great for recruiting.
Right.
Oh my gosh. We've had a bunch of Salesforce people come work for us since we ran the campaign. And, that's awesome, as well as other competitors knocking at our door, people working there saying, hey, we want to be part of this. Right.
Right.
And so that's always, one of the ancillary payoffs of these things.
Yeah. And it's funny. We think about employees first in this, in a kind of a program like this, and in any kind of actually B2B marketing program, because if they're not on board, and particularly in San Francisco, where the battle is of talent, I mean, you can't hit your numbers if you don't hire fast enough. So
exactly.
Anyway, as we wrap up this the show, I have a list of things that I want to share with the listeners, but I'm curious if you have 2 do's and a don't for your fellow B2B CMOs.
Oh, 2 do's and a don't?
Yes.
Okay. Don't be afraid.
But be nervous.
Be nervous. I mean, as in, be afraid, but don't be afraid. Right? So if you're not doing something that makes you nervous, you're probably not doing the right thing.
Right.
But then the other thing I would say is be substantive. Don't just do something because it's funny or sexy.
Right.
Do it with a substantive payoff that delivers value to the customer.
I love that. And I think that's so important in all of this. It is not just a moment in time, a gorilla in a jockstrap. There was an idea, a strategic idea, and an insight. In fact, you had research to back up this, but you dramatized it and took it to the nth degree. And that's really important here too, is that if you want to cut through, you really need to go out on an edge, even I would say even in B2B. Here's the thing: in truth, it doesn't take much in B2B to cut through. Just a little bit of edge. You happen to take it. You flew you put a blimp next to one of the largest buildings in San Francisco, that's right in their face.
Right in the face.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Well, as we wrap up the show, definitely, as listeners know, the cat's traits of being a great, effective marketer, having the courage to take a risk and be unique. Number 1, being artful in the execution, and so interesting to hear David talk about the message and how it was delivered. Thoughtful. If you go to their blog and look at the thing, I think you'll enjoy some of these blog posts a lot more than you do others. And then we spent a lot of time, actually, despite the fact we spent 75% talking about the idea and how fun it was. There were a lot of metrics. There's a lot of thought to, okay, we've created this awareness. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to manage it? So we got to the scientific part of CATS. So, all right. David, amazing to spend time with you. Thanks so much.
Great to talk to you, Drew. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And to all my listeners, again, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I'm so grateful. If you enjoyed this show, besides doing something pretty challenging and outrageous, go ahead and go to iTunes, which is not outrageous, and rate the show. 5 stars will be just fine. And until next week, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.